So it is 5:15 on the dot. So I believe we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us. This is really our second iteration of diversity dialogues, where we're just really having conversations that contribute to diversity, equity, and inclusion here at the School of Dentistry, at VCU School of Dentistry. And this month we're celebrating Women's History Month and all of the achievements, both historically and in current times, that women have really set a precedent around and achieved. And so when we conceived of this, we thought, well, there's no better woman at this hour to have a discussion with than our new dean, Dr. Clara Spatafore. So I'm very excited to have her here with us this evening and talk with her really about her journey and story and how she got to us here at VCU.
Happy to be here, Carlos.
Awesome. Thank you so much. For all of the participants, I will encourage you, if you want to put a question either in the chat or in the Q&A, we will attempt to answer those questions. We have a few prepared questions that we'll certainly get to, but if you have questions or comments at all, you can put those in the chat and in the Q&A, and we'll get to those as time allows, all right? I do want to just, since it's Women's History Month, I want to be sure to lift up the name of Dr. Tille Lyons Weinstein, who was our first female graduate here at the VCU School of Dentistry. I'm a history buff, which now everybody's learning that I am. And so I thought it was riveting that she's the older sister of Dr. Harry Lyons, who our building, one of our buildings, is named for, and was his inspiration to pursue a dental career. So I don't know that we lead with that fact when we talk about having your office in the Lyons building, but I thought it was really an interesting factoid. And way back in 1922, she was a graduate of the School of Dentistry. So we'll get started with the questions here. So I'm an ethicist in addition to being a general dentist, and one of the latest frameworks for teaching ethics, it's been happening in medicine for a while, but now in dental education, is narrative ethics and the power of telling a story, right? And so with that, as the first female dean of the VCU School of Dentistry, one of your many career accolades, I'd really love to begin by you just simply sharing your story with us. I know a little bit about your family, owning a store in West Virginia, but tell us a little bit about your story, how West Virginia shaped who you are and your upbringing.
All right, Carlos. Well, anybody that knows me knows about my family. So I was born in Clarksburg, West Virginia. It's a small town in northern West Virginia. And I'm the oldest of 4 girls. But I lived in Summit Park, and my neighbors were all of my aunts and uncles. And my Aunt Rosie owned a little grocery store a couple of doors down from our house. And my dad worked in a glass factory, and my mom was a stay-home mom until my youngest sister went to college. But we grew up with our cousins next door, our aunts and uncles next door. So we had a lot of bosses growing up. And my mom's family, my mom was the next to the youngest of 11 children. My dad was the youngest of 9 children. And our grandparents were from a small town in Italy, San Giovanni and Fiori in Italy. And in fact, my mother's older brother was born, my Uncle Carl was born in Italy. And then they came over to the United States. So at that time, a lot of Italians came to northern West Virginia to work in the coal mines. And my grandfather Filosa did work in the coal mines, but my grandfather Spatafore, I think, went one day and decided he was too claustrophobic for that. So they opened a small grocery store. And after he passed away, my Aunt Rosie took it over. And as young children, we all worked in the grocery store. And my dad growing up had quite a few sayings. And one was, everybody work, everybody eat. And so everybody worked in the store. My mom had a garden. So it was a typical Italian upbringing. Everything was about family. Every Sunday we had dinner at the store with our cousins and aunts and uncles, and everybody contributed, and it was a wonderful upbringing. I went to WVU undergrad, and then I went directly into dental school. My sister Teresa also went to WVU. She has a master's in safety engineering. My sister Mary went to WVU, and she has an MBA, but she's also graduating here in a few months with a sports management master's. And then my youngest sister Joanna also went there. She graduated as a CPA, but works in IT for BNY Mellon. So our family has a huge WVU tradition. My Uncle Sammy actually played on, I think it was the 1936 Sun Bowl team. So,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we're all super WVU fans. And when I was in dental school there, I met my husband, Phil Bartling, and Phil's also from West Virginia, went to school there. And so we got married right after dental school. I worked as a general dentist for 3 years in Pittsburgh. I always knew I wanted to be an endodontist. So before I graduated, I went in to talk to Ed Skidmore and I said, I want to be an endodontist. And he said, well, we like people that have been in private practice a few years. So I worked in Pittsburgh, downtown Pittsburgh, and I learned from the dentist that I worked with how actually not to treat people. So that was good. Then I went back to my endo program. So on my interview day, it was my due date with my first son.
Oh my goodness.
And yeah, Ed Skidmore said, when do you do? And I said, today. And he said, you're in. So I did 2 years of my endo residency there. And my first son was born right before I went in, Daniel. And Daniel's actually an endodontist, married to an endodontist, and they work in Harrisonburg, Virginia. And then after I got out of my endo residency, I had decided that I had done all my training at WVU, and I felt like I needed something different. So I always felt like I should give back because I have been so blessed in life. So I joined the Navy, and my husband and I went to Norfolk. And while we were there, on my way to boot camp, I found out I was pregnant. So I never do anything easy. So 6 weeks in Newport, Rhode Island, during July, pregnant with my second son, Matthew. And Matthew is a lawyer and currently lives in Denver, Colorado. And then while I was in the Navy and met several friends that I actually still have to this day and who work here with me at VCU, Jim Heffernan and his wife, Joanne, Rick Archer, his wife, Lisa, Fred Sertasimo. I knew indirectly Steve Marinelli and Al Russell, but we have several Navy people represented here at VCU that I knew while I was in the Navy. Had my first daughter, Justina, while I was in the Navy, and she's a veterinarian. She's actually doing a residency in critical care veterinary medicine in Boston. So then, while I was in the Navy, first Persian Gulf War happened, and I was actually in line to go overseas, and they said, Lieutenant Spatafore, step out of line, you're pregnant. I said, no, I have a 3-month-old at home. And they said, well, no, you're pregnant and you don't have to go to Afghanistan. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm pregnant. So after the Navy, my commanding officer went to the University of Pittsburgh as the dean and recruited me there. So we moved back to Pittsburgh, and then he moved to Allegheny General Hospital, and I moved there with him. And I worked there for about 7 years, and then opened my own practice in Pittsburgh. And while at that time, we actually, our fourth daughter came for us. So her name's Alyssa, and Alyssa's in law school. So Phil and I have paid 32 years of tuition for college, and we figured Alyssa's in her last semester, so we just made her last tuition payments. We're very happy about that. So then I was in private practice, and we had a beautiful home, but our fourth child was getting out of high school, and we had this big house in an area that had high taxes, and someone was driving by one day and said to my husband, I'd like to buy your house, and he sold it to me. And so I was going to Bethesda to do board exams with Rick Archer, and I said to Rick, someone bought my house. And Rick said, well, we were driving back to Richmond because I was also speaking here. And I said, someone approached me about buying the practice. And he said, well, you know, we really need a chair of endodontics. Why don't you talk to the dean? So amazingly, the dean had time that day. So I went and talked to Dave Surratt, and he said, you know, why don't you consider teaching? So I talked to Phil that night. I said, Phil, they want me to come to VCU. And he said, well, you've always wanted to do that. And so that's how I ended up at VCU. So I came here and did endo for 5.5 years, 6 years. And then about a year and a half ago, when Jim Burns retired, they asked me if I wanted to be chair of ODS also. So it was one of those things that, you know, like it was almost like a snowball effect. It just all happened. So it was, the hardest thing was the first 2 years here, because I was going back and forth to Pittsburgh and leaving my family, because two of my sisters, Teresa and Joanna, live in Pittsburgh. Mary lives in Morgantown, and my mom still lives in Clarksburg, West Virginia. So, but as far as family, family is everything to me. My sisters, my brother-in-laws, nieces, nephews, my children, my husband, everybody's, Phil calls it the network, because oftentimes he finds out what's happening because I'm on the phone with one of my sisters. So
I mean, you have a riveting story. You need to put this all in a book. I mean, everything just kind of organically kept rolling and kept rolling. Yes. I know you've obviously had a very storied career as an endodontist, and you're still an endodontist. And you've reached kind of the pinnacle of that field as president of the American Association of Endodontists. And I believe you were the second female president of that group, correct?
So I actually was on the phone today with the first female president, who said I needed to mention her name, Sandy Madison. And I think she's actually on this call, but yes, I was the second female president. And she never lets me forget that she was first and I was second. So
could you tell us about that journey? And you know, obviously in talking about kind of gender dynamics and things that people have had to endure, challenges they've overcome. What was that journey like, kind of ascending to that height of the profession?
So when I was in the Navy, Jeff Hutter was my department chair, and he became president of the AAE. And when you become president, you have to fill committee slots. So he called me and said, I'd like you to be on the Research and Scientific Affairs Committee. So at that time, I had 4 kids and a practice, and I thought, oh, golly, how am I going to juggle all this? But I did it, and it was so rewarding. And so I was actually going into the American College of Dentists, and I went to an AAE reception at the ADA, and I met Lou Rossman, who was the representative from our district. And he said, you know, we need to get more females involved. I'd like you to be the District 1 rep. And so he put my name in the hat. I got selected. So I was on the board of directors for 3 years for the AAE. And it was probably one of the best learning experiences of my life. We learned about knowledge-based governance, and it was kind of evidence-based decision-making for governance. And so when I was done being on the board of directors, several people on the nominating committee said, would you be interested in becoming an officer, including Sandy? And I said, well, sure. As my family will tell you, I'm a little bossy. I do like being in charge. So I got nominated, I was selected, and I went through each of the offices there. And it was really great, because it's kind of like, you think about it like evolution. In the beginning, most of the endodontists were men. And when I went to dental school, out of a class of 64, there were 13 females in my class. And before that, I think there were like 6. Before that, 1 or 2. So it kind of evolved into more women being in the dental classes, more women going on to residencies. I was actually the first female resident at WVU.
Oh, wow.
And one of my friends called and said I was purely a political choice. But I actually think I should have been there. So, sure. But when I started moving up the offices of the AAE, I got to travel more. I got to go to more leadership courses. It was a great journey. It was probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me in my life. But it was after my term as immediate past president, one of the female endodontists wrote a letter to me and said, you know, you put more women in place, you put more women as chair of head of committees. And, you know, I didn't do it on purpose. I just kind of did it because I thought they were the best people for the job. And you and I have talked about this too, in that these women were my peers and I saw what they could do and I knew that they would do a great job. So I maybe somewhere in the back of my mind, I had this promote women banner, but it just seemed like the right thing to do.
Yeah, along with that, you know, as a woman in the profession, what would you say has been maybe your most rewarding aspect of choosing dentistry as a career, and perhaps the most challenging?
So I have to say that my first year of dental school was tough, and I came from a med tech undergrad where the 25 kids, you're at the top of the class, and you go to a dental class of 63 people as smart, if not smarter than you. And so I really thought about dropping out. I had two really good friends, Jennifer Rice and Paul Rapel, who said that would be such a mistake. And so that was good because after graduating and doing general dentistry and endodontics, I can tell you that I have loved my career. And what I think I've loved the most about it is I think that in our patients' lives, we have made a difference. We have so many people are so afraid of the dentist. And after they have come to our offices and they walk away, they're out of pain or they're smiling. That's been the most rewarding. Just as an endodontist, it's easy to say we get people in pain and we take them out of pain. And because you know how everybody thinks, oh, root canals. But you know, once you sell that slogan, I'm going to get you out of pain. So patient care was the most rewarding for me. The hardest challenging part was just juggling everything. When the kids were little and I worked at Allegheny General, I'd work days and Phil would work nights. And he worked at Mellon Bank. And what we would do is we would meet on First Street and switch cars because we had 3 car seats in the one car. And I'd jump in his car and he'd jump in mine. And say if I got a late emergency or, you know, something happened with traffic, it was so stressful. But I do have to say, you get past that. And so just the juggling was tough. It was tough at times, but our kids, I remember my daughter Justina saying to me one time, Mom, we're the only kids in school with 100% perfect attendance. So, so maybe I wasn't the most sympathetic when my kids thought they wanted to stay home, but the juggling was tough.
Yeah, so I think your trajectory of your career is so fascinating, and how kind of you tell these stories in that, you know, and then this happened, and then this happened, which you know, did you set out to do these things? I guess we talk a lot now about, you know, setting goals, and certainly there's a place for that. But I think sometimes we're almost so goal oriented, we lose sight of other things. And so you have achieved all these different things. Was that the goal, or?
Well, so so I just want to say that at my dental school interview, I'm sorry, at my endo residency, Ed Skidmore said, "Where do you see yourself in 30 years?" And I said, "I'm going to be the dean of the dental school." And so here I am. And so I laugh about that. Everybody laughs about that. But honestly, as far as my goal has always been to just do my best, number one, always take the high road, number two. And I think that anybody that knows me will tell you how, in fact, the endo department gets sick of hearing that. But the AAE did a ton of market research on how to be a successful dentist or endodontist. And number one was to always do good work. Number two was always take good care of your patients. And number three was to be kind to your general dentist and everybody else. And those have been the tenets of my life. I've always, and it comes from my parents. My parents were president of the PTA, and they were always involved in, selling this or helping the school with that. My dad was the treasurer of the union. So they always gave back. We never had a lot of money, but my dad always believed what you gave away, you got back tenfold. And that's how he raised us. So did I have specific written goals? No. No, it was always just try to be the best at what I did and treat others like I wanted to be treated.
Sure. And you sort of have this legacy or lineage of this sort of familial, entrepreneurial, go-getter fabric and spirit, I guess. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And, I always, I don't know how many of my sisters are on this call today, but I always say my sisters are me on steroids. All four of us are like this, and we have in our immediate family, there's 22 of us, and all my nieces and nephews have gone to college or will go to college. I think because they're afraid of, so my son, Matthew, said to me, we were talking, and I said, so many of your friends dropped out of school, out of college, why? And he said, because they're not as afraid of their mom as I am. So, honestly, I do think it has to do with family and setting goals. And so one goal that I set for myself is I'm trying to learn to speak Italian. Because when my parents came over, my grandparents, it wasn't like it is today where everybody wanted to acclimate me. So I started taking Italian here at VCU, and it was really the thing that actually helped me. I had a rough first year being away from my family, and I took a class from Gabriella Valsecchi on the campus here, Italian 101, and it really just turned my stay here at VCU around, I do have to say. But on the first test, I got a 94. And my sister said, well, since Joe Robert is not alive, meaning my dad, what happened to that 6 points you left on the table? So that's it. We had expectations.
Sure. We talked about your story and your narrative, but what was your first exposure to dentistry?
So I had braces, and when I was probably about 15 years old, and Dr. Mazzei was our family dentist, and he was very old-fashioned. He stood up, and my dad used to call him the butcher, because if you had a cavity, he would extract it for you. So that's, but he was a good man, and he took care of everybody, regardless if they could pay or not, and I always admired that. And my Aunt Betty actually worked for his family. And then my orthodontist, Dr. Pringle, just going into his office. And then I had a cousin who was a dentist and actually taught at WVU. And so the med tech program was right next to the dental program. And so I thought about medical school for a while, but I did a 2-week rotation on OBGYN and realized I could not stay up on that. But, and I had always admired the dentists that I knew. And so I did a little shadowing in some offices, and then decided dentistry was the right career.
I think too, one interesting thing too, and again, in kind of lifting up Women's History Month, I know as I have learned more and taken more on formally around diversity and inclusion and those kinds of things, and even just as an observer of life, right? You look around at gender dynamics, and it's a very common conversation now, but I don't know that it always has been, obviously. And so one of the things with gender dynamics that's robust in the research is kind of, say you're in a meeting or at a table, and there's different things that come up, and a woman presents an idea, or ask a question, or has a solution, and it kind of is hushed over or ignored or glossed over, and then a male may lift kind of the same notion or even the same sentence a few minutes later, and then it's oh, this is genius, great job. Have you ever had incidents like that or episodes like that in your career, and if so, how have you navigated that?
So that is an absolute fact, Carlos. Absolute fact. And any woman in a position such as mine, or a board president, any situation will tell you that that is true. So, um, in fact, Sandy, another president of the AAE, Terrell Cropper, Linda Levin, and Sandy and I are the four females in the 75 years. And we often laugh about this and how we've gotten our ideas across in a boardroom. And it's not limited to a boardroom. But what we have done, and maybe it's a little shifty, but so a lot of issues are solved in either the men's room or the women's room. So what we do is we get the idea, and I'm giving away our secrets, I apologize, but we get the idea and then we make a lot of the men think it was their original idea. And then once they come up with it, it's a great idea. So we don't get credit for it, but we get our idea out there. So it happens, and yes, and it's funny because I think that Kim Isrenhausen, who's the new dean of HR here, we've often talked about we'll send something out in an email or bring it up, and it's crickets. Like nobody says anything, but one of our male counterparts bringing it up later on, and it was, oh my gosh, we've solved world peace. So yeah, it happens, and you know what, you can't let it set you back. It's more about the idea than the accolades. So if you want that idea bad enough, you'll figure out a way to get it across. So yeah, Carlos, I'd ask your wife this question, because I think if you ask my husband this question, he would think he had all these great ideas, but really they're your wife's ideas, Carlos.
No, I'm aware. I'm a son and a brother and a husband and soon to be father of three girls. So I'm with it.
Yeah, we're masters at it. And we just, our egos just can't get in the way.
Awesome. There are a lot of sources, the ADA, ADEA, all kinds of things that are showing that really finally women are sort of reaching parity, at least in numbers of dental students. We're at about 50% nationally. I think the latest figure I saw for women in practice is about 34% of practicing dentists. Obviously the profession has evolved or is evolving. Do you see dentistry and dental education as actually more inclusive than when you were a student? And where do you see it going?
So I actually think dentistry is a great career for a woman, because first of all, when we do all these studies, we see that women dentists and endodontists actually attract more patients than men, surprisingly. But again, when I was in dental school, we had all older white guys as teachers because that's who were the dentists.
Sure.
And so I actually think more and more women will go into education. But I'm going to tell you that as far as education goes, it takes a heck of a lot more time than private practice. I really admire the women that are in education, because there are no boundaries, especially now with COVID. It just never quits. At least when you're in a practice, when my kids had something at school, I could mark the afternoon off, go have a good time, not even worry about it. I mean, I got to be a homeroom mother. I got to go to all sporting events. But in education, it's a lot tougher to walk away when you have a class or something along those lines. But as far as the big picture goes, I think most dental classes are now at least 51% women. And I actually think that the people that are choosing dentistry, most dentists are very happy with their careers. I know you see those statistics that say they commit suicide, but I don't think it's any more than the regular population.
Sure.
But as far as education goes, I'd like to see, and I think this is going to evolve just like the dental school classes. I think that the people that are going to be teaching are going to mirror what the classes look like eventually. It's going to take a few years, but it's going to mirror what the diversity in our classes seem to be. And one thing that I've learned since becoming dean is we do need to target specific groups, whether it's women, whether it's Latinos, whether it's African Americans. We need to do something to attract these different types of groups to dentistry, whether it's like going into the grade schools or the junior highs, the high schools. Let people know that dentistry is the career for them. And eventually, maybe education also, dental education.
Awesome, awesome. Outside of, and if folks that are on with us, if you have a question, please feel free to put that in the Q&A. We're going to stay on here probably right till 6 o'clock, so we'll be at right an hour. But if you have a question or a comment, you can feel free to put that in the chat or in the Q&A. But obviously, we are continuing to endure COVID. But perhaps outside of that, what do you see as the biggest challenge that we may be facing kind of in dentistry and dental education right now or in the next few years?
I actually think our biggest challenge is student debt. It's amazing when you look at the ADIA statistics. I was on a committee for the AAE where the AAE gave, for lack of a better word, scholarships to people that wanted to go into endodontics and then give back 5 years of teaching. And when these kids came in and they were 350,000, 400,000, University of Pennsylvania, I think their tuition's $115,000 a year for dental school. And these for-profit dental schools that are out there, these kids are coming out of school between $275,000 and $500,000 in debt. And that just scares me because you make decisions based on what you owe and what your payment is that month. And that's scary. You never want to make a treatment decision based on, oh my gosh, I have to make these student loans. So sure. Student debt is one of my biggest concerns for dentistry.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I guess I've been out almost 15 years, and on average, I mean, it's probably double even what I came out with. So it's definitely a significant issue. And at some point, my concern is, the return on investment. Do people feel like they will get that? And so do they start to look at other pathways?
Exactly. In private practice, with the advent of the corporate dental groups and the less that you're earning, say if you did go fee for service or insurance, it's scary. And these kids are coming out and having to move back home with their parents, and this is a house and a car payment trying to pay off these students. Sure. So I mean, $400,000 house, that's a pretty nice house. So, but yeah, that to me is the scariest for these kids coming out. So
yeah. I know you talked a little bit about your Navy career, and how do you think that shaped you as both a clinician and as an educator?
So one thing that I learned in the Navy was chain of command. And so my first week at reporting for duty, Jim Heffernan had to tell me what side the little stars went on and the little lieutenant bars and all that, because I've never been one for strictly adhering to like serious rules. So that Navy really helped me with that, and that it was always the needs of the Navy that came first. And you kind of need to apply that in life too. My kids went to this camp, and they talked about I am third, and that's kind of how it is with the Navy too. We're at a dental school. The school's first, the students and faculty are second, and I am third. And that's kind of what you learn with the Navy. The needs of the Navy, the patients and the troops are always going to come second, and then you're third. But in the Navy, it was all about camaraderie, and you had instant friends. And we went to work early. We did all of our work, but yet we had wonderful outings on the weekends and in the evenings, and everybody was supportive. It was like an instant family. So I really enjoyed my time in the Navy a lot. And I've met people who are my friends today. So
awesome. Well, I think we're nearing our time. I really only have one last question for you. And you can also share with us if there's other things you want folks to know. but obviously your career and everything has kind of organically had this momentum. Do you ever think about legacy and what you'd perhaps want your legacy to be?
Well, I think everybody thinks about that, Carlos. I think that if you don't, and you're an educator, maybe you should. But when I came to VCU, I came to the endodontics department, and it was a little bit of a turmoil. And I really felt like we turned it around, and we're graduating wonderful residents. Over the last 6 years, all of our residents have passed their boards and moved on. And yeah, I've gotten to work with Gary Myers. He came at the same time as me. He came a few months, as he reminds me, he came a few months before me. And the same thing with being dean. Dean Surratt was a wonderful dean, and he really had a great vision about moving to the outpatient facility, and that didn't come through. But Omar Abelbacher introduced me the other day as a fixer, that I go in and look at issues and try to fix them. And so my legacy would be, I hope that I leave this dental school fixed when I leave, that I'm at a place where we're financially stable, we're graduating competent dentists who all want to go out and do the right thing for their patients. We're graduating residents who move all over the country and want to give back, not just with their time, but with their money to the dental school. That is one thing too that I really would like to stress that I have always done. And my sisters and my family, I want to give back with not only my time, but with my money. And I hope that everybody that's on this call that's graduated from a dental school or any kind of a profession realizes how lucky we are, because I mean, we were born here. Those of us that were born in the United States or got to come here, we hit the jackpot. I mean, we have a great education system. We got to go to dental school. So I hope that people think about giving back, not just with their time, but to their money, whether it's to their synagogues, their mosques, their churches, their organizations. You know, we didn't get here in a vacuum. And
Sure.
so that is one thing that I hope that my legacy is. And I think that I've instilled that in my children. I know that my parents instilled that in us. And one thing that I didn't get to talk about was that I am, in case you can't see back there, I'm a super WVU fan. And they actually lost today. So I was kind of in mourning, but sitting here talking to you, I feel better. But, you know, I just think that we need to realize that, you know, there are things that are bigger than ourselves, and that giving back is really important. So,
Well, thank you so much. I think it's interesting, the label of a fixer. I mean, that seems to be in line with your field as an endodontist. So
exactly.
that makes a lot of
Exactly.
sense. Yeah.
So, you know, Carlos, I want to thank you too, because I really enjoyed your last interview that you did. And I actually think that I know Nan's on here. Obviously, this is something that we might want to do once a month now, Carlos, as I'm volunteering you for this. But just so everybody on the call knows, Carlos just recently won 2 ADIA awards and is having a new little baby in about 3 weeks. So his sleep is over.
Well,
So,
thank you, but it's not about me. Let's focus on you. But yeah, no, I think this is great. Thank you so much. I don't think we have any other questions or
I
comments in the
actually
queue.
see one in the chat here, Carlos.
Yeah, they said this
Oh,
was so incredibly inspiring and encouraging. Thank you, Dean Spatafore and Dr. Smith.
well, thank you.
So
That's
yeah,
very nice. That's very
yeah.
nice. And if anybody, you know, if there's any future questions or anything, I think most people have our emails, Carlos. We can run, but we can't hide. But if you guys think of anything that you'd like us to do here at VCU School of Dentistry as far as future interviews like this, please email Carlos or Nan Johnson. We're always looking for ideas to get the word out about the dental school.
Well, this has been so rich. And I again, if I could just personally say, I think I first got a lot of your personality when I was on a search committee and we were at a dinner, I believe at the Jefferson, back when we could eat dinner in person together. And it was just such a joy because at being in GP, I didn't really interact much with you previous to that. So what you see is what you get, and you were telling us all kinds of great stories and different things that you cook, and just it was really a joy. So I'm so glad that you were able to sit down and share a little bit of your story with the school in our Diversity Dialogue series, and just appreciate you so much.
You know, Carlos, one thing I did not mention is that I love to cook and my family loves to eat. So, all my kids are good cooks, my sisters, but family, my husband Phil and I, we've had we've often said that we're Mr. Toad's Wild Ride at Disney with our life. So, I personally want to thank my mom. And I just want to say, I got preempted by bingo tonight. My mom goes to bingo on Thursday nights. And so once I told her that this was going to be on YouTube, she selected bingo first. But my mom and my husband, Phil, have been my biggest supporters over the years. And I wouldn't want to get out this call without saying, Phil's the one that said when I thought, oh my gosh, should I go to endo? And I have a 7-month-old. He said, yes, we'll make it work. And then when I wanted to come to VCU, we'll make it work. So he has always been a strong supporter, and I could not have done this without him. So it's been a juggle, but there's been two hands juggling all the balls. So
Well, that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Dr. Spatafore. We appreciate your time.
All righty.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.